Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Boston Balling. I'm your host, Gabby Hurlbut. Hope you're all having a great start to the week. The holidays are here. Happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, whatever you celebrate out there. It is that time. Besides the fact that it feels like it's about 10 o'clock at night right now, it's still a great time of year. I hope everyone's ready for the holidays. I'm excited. I know I am. So I'm also excited to bring you another episode of the show. A lot going on in Boston sports right now. I have a really cool guest on here with me. He's from CLNS Media. He works with some other people I've actually had on the show in the past. John Zannis, how are you doing this evening?
What's going on, Gabby? How are you? Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. I really
Sure, yeah.
appreciate it. I know
Yeah,
you love Boston sports as much as I do, so this should be fun.
yeah, definitely. It's obviously there's always a lot going on, but especially it feels like right now there's a lot. So yeah.
Yeah, I feel like this time of year, just with, because we're in the middle of football season, we're in the middle of basketball and hockey seasons, baseball, there's obviously a lot of action with,
Nobody cares.
free agency. So there's definitely, it's just like a good time of year for sports, you
Yeah,
know?
totally.
But yeah, I definitely appreciate you, hopping on here with me. Before we kind of get started, just tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of how you got involved in the industry.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've been doing this now for 20 something years. This was kind of my I don't want a real job when I first got out of college, and I just wanted to do work in sports or sports media or a lot of different things like that. And I'm sure there's a lot of other people right now probably kind of having the same thought. I was very fortunate. One job kind of led to another, and I was able to carve out a career. I worked in, you know, like everyone, odds and ends, worked in doing news. I worked as a video editor. I worked as a writer. I produced news, at New England Cable News. Then I worked in sports, moved over to the sports department full time, became the executive producer at WHDH, moved to NBC Boston, which at the time was something else. I forget, CSN or Comcast Sportsnet. Worked there for 10 plus years. And during this entire run, have just been very fortunate, not only to have a career in this industry, but to work with some amazing people. But also, this time of Boston sports is ridiculous. I mean, I've basically been doing this professionally since the golden age began, really I started in 1997, but I mean, really, if you're talking about the 2001 Patriots and then everything else that followed and all of those championships, I've been fortunate enough not only to cover them, but to cover most of them in person, which is just amazing. And so it just kind of keeps going. We're obviously in a teeny bit of a lull right now. A title drought of what, 4 years or something, but it's
Which feels like forever for Boston fans, I
but
know.
you know what though, my vibe is someone who kind of my age, my generation, we've lived through some
Yeah.
downtimes. So we went 15 years between 1986 when Larry Bird and the Celtics won their last title to 2001. 15-year drought. Those were very important years in my kind of sports life and sports development. So I got hungry, and when it happened, I appreciated it. And a lot of you guys are a little bit spoiled, I'll be honest, and it's fine. But now you're getting hungry again because I'm not going to say dark days, because again, it's only a few years without a title. But you realize it's hard to do. It's hard to get back there. And when the only thing you'll accept as a fan base is a championship and you don't get one, you start to get a little bit itchy. And so that's why, these reactions to the way the Patriots are playing now. Everybody basically, Celtics are title or bust, and the Red Sox can't even get on the radar these days because,
Yeah.
it doesn't look like they're trying. So, so that's kind of me in a nutshell. Now, obviously, I'm over at CLNS Media. I'm the president of CLNS Media, work with some really awesome guys over there. We do, we cover the Celtics, Patriots. We do a post-game pod called The Garden Report every night, which is a lot of fun. It's also, as kind of your show, a pandemic era show that started. We've always covered sports and always covered the Celtics in a very robust way, but most of it was by sending reporters down to the game and doing, things in the field. And then we were all just sitting around. And when the bubble started again and they started back up, we're like, let's just start doing it. And we've been doing it ever since the Celtics, since basically sports started up again post-COVID. And so that's where we're at. And it's been, like I said, it's a lot of fun. to do this show, and it's fun to have like a live audience and an interactive audience, and people engaging with us. I felt like we kind of got through COVID together with some people, and then kind of came out the other side with this product that we were like, hey, this is cool. Let's keep it going, and that's where we're at.
Yeah, it's super cool to hear about all that and just kind of hear different people's journeys about how they got to
Yeah.
where they are. And honestly, as a sports fan, who wouldn't want to just do sports as their job? You know, like
Yeah.
there's nothing better than that.
I mean, that's the thing. Everyone says it as a cliche, like feel like you haven't worked. Like I legit have always kind of felt that way. You know, probably some of my bosses in the past were like, yeah, he acted like he didn't work. But like it's not serious. We're not saving lives. We basically just get to sit and talk about what's fun and interesting in the sports world, and then decide how to deliver it to whichever medium, you know, we're working with at the time, whether it be television or a podcast or whatever. But it's basically like, what would be fun to talk about is at the core, at the essence of it all, which is what makes it really fun, because it's the same conversations you're having all day long in group chats and text messages when you're watching stuff with friends, you know, right after a game. The whole idea of water cooler conversation, that stuff's real. I mean, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the stuff that you'd be talking about with your buddies or with whomever if you're watching games, or doing anything, or just following teams as a passionate fan base, you know, which obviously exists here in Boston. So you just get to kind of, you know, because of that passion, everything feels important, and you talk about it, and it's pointless. None of it matters, but it feels important because it matters to a lot of people, and that's what we get to do.
Yeah, exactly. And especially like
Yeah.
you said with Boston fans, it's just a really, really passionate fan base.
Yeah.
So being able to just talk about it with people who share that same passion as you do, I feel like is what just makes it really special.
Yeah, it's insane. It's great. That's the best part about it. Almost anything that you say, there'll be a group of people on one side who are like, absolutely. And there'll be a 50% of the people on the other, like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. You know, like everything, almost every statement you can make about anything going on in Boston sports ends up being polarizing because people feel so strongly about everything.
It's so true, but I love that. Even on Twitter too, with
Oh, I love it.
interacting with people on Twitter, there's so many different opinions on
Oh my
different things,
goodness.
and it just makes it so fun.
It's hilarious, actually. It's the warring factions between kind of the homers and the haters, so to speak.
It
You
is
know,
funny.
cracks me up, and it sometimes I like to go in there and poke the bear a little bit and stir the pot, and I'm sure I've agitated some people along the way.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a fun space to be
Well,
in, and sports are really the best, and it's great to be able to be a part of that on a day-to-day basis. And I mean, I
it's
know
great.
you said you did touch on it already, but with the Patriots right now, I do want to start with that
Sure.
because
Yeah.
that game on Sunday, I mean, they had so much momentum in that second half of that game. They really, really were turning things around and fixed a lot of the mistakes from the first half. And then all of a sudden, they just do what arguably could be the dumbest thing I think I've ever seen
Yeah.
at the end of a football game. And in a game like that where you absolutely have to win that game in order to keep your playoff hopes really alive, that is just so not ideal to lose a game that way. And I was watching that and I was like, what is Jacoby Myers doing? Like the game was already over. Just send it to overtime. Like the clock had already expired. Like, why are you trying to feel like you need to do all that with running a lateral at that point when you can just go out of bounds and just send the game to overtime? I
Yeah.
didn't I just seriously didn't understand. I mean, I watched the play over and over again to try to think about what his thought process could have been, and I just couldn't come up with anything. And even after the game, in his press conference, he didn't really say much about why he did it. He just owned up to what he did and said it's my fault.
Yeah, he looked like he was in total shock. I mean, honestly, like, I don't think there's any explaining it, and I don't even think it really requires a full autopsy. I think just in that moment, it just happened, and there's no explanation for why it happened. And that's it. And then you move. I was both speechless and also I couldn't stop talking about it. Like I couldn't believe it. Um, so and I think everyone was the same thing. Like, what did we just see? It's the dumbest thing I've ever seen from a player that's, kind of like you think of more of a heady player. Not someone who'd be prone to some sort of, such a ridiculous mistake. But it was such a like a next level. It was such like a supernatural level of stupidity, like that was just almost unfathomable, because it doesn't matter what the situation is. Almost under no circumstances would that play have any chance of working ever in flag football, in anything. It doesn't matter. Throwing it 30 yards backwards to the slowest guy currently on the field for the hope of what? What would have happened if Mac caught it? Best case scenario, Mac grabs it and gets his head taken off by Chandler Jones, and we go to overtime with a decapitated quarterback. That was the best case scenario. That extending that play by throwing it backwards to Mac Jones was just certain doom. So it happened, and that's that. So I think people were stunned. The reason I think, like, I don't know how it is, the people you've spoken to, I almost like moved from shock to laughter afterwards, because it's I wouldn't say emblematic of everything wrong with the team this year. I think it's unfair to say like the coaches should have told them not to do the dumbest, most unforeseen thing ever. I read somewhere, and I can't remember who had said it. Maybe it might have been Greg Bedard, or somebody kind of wrote like, yeah, like if you send your children off to bed and say, okay, make sure you use the bathroom, you're not also saying, and in order to do that, make sure you lift up the toilet seat. And they're supposed to know what that means. When they called that play, they're supposed to know. Don't all of a sudden just throw it backwards 30 yards to Mac, like that's not part of the preparation. But it is still emblematic of just how dumb everything that's gone on around this team is. And I think that's where everybody kind of lumps it all in. I think people have accepted the Patriots' fate this year, that even if they get into the playoffs, their ceiling is very ugly first-round exit. I think that's as far as this team can get. I think, based on the stuff we said at the beginning of the show, that its titles are a bust, that the reduced expectations, I think, around this team are one of the reasons why there hasn't been as much buzz around the team. And the worse Mac has played, there's been less hope for the future as well. So people have gotten really, really down in general. Now you're really in a head-scratching kind of place if you're the Patriots, because this season's pretty much all but over. The last 3 games are going to be really hard for them to win and get into the playoffs. And you're stuck in the worst place you could possibly be in the NFL, which is the freaking middle. And there's nothing worse than mediocrity for a fan base, particularly one that's used to, trust me, and we've been through this with the Celtics before too. Tanking is fine. Mediocrity is not. Mediocrity is how you lose people. Tanking is fine. You want to know that there's some sort of light at the end of the tunnel. And right now, I don't think anybody can see it.
No, I can't see it at all. And it's just, like you said, that play was just so representative of the Patriots season in general, because they just look so much like a team that's poorly coached and unprepared going into games, and they're making mistakes that are really entry level mistakes that, they're going out there and they're not really looking like an NFL team. That whole first half in that game, they looked like a team that was just poorly coached, and all of the mistakes that they're making have been going on throughout the entire season that you would think would have been addressed by now, but haven't been, with all of, the penalties and these mistakes that they're making. They just don't look as clean in a lot of certain situations as other teams around the league look. And that hurt them. That entire first half, I just was getting so frustrated, because I was like, this is how this entire season has gone. And these are mistakes that you would think would be fixable, but they haven't fixed. And they look like they're, not a professional football team with these mistakes.
Yeah, I think both Patriots analysis and Patriots fans all year long have just kind of like spent the entire year tearing each other apart, trying to figure out which of the things is most to blame, instead of just kind of looking at the picture and recognizing that it's all bad, almost at the same time. And that's kind of why you have what you have here. There are personnel issues, which are real. There actually ends up being more talent on defense than a lot of people gave this team credit for. But offensively, I don't think you can argue that it's the worst or among the bottom 5 skill position groups in the league. It's one of the bottom 5 offensive line in the league. And now you have a quarterback who is the type of quarterback who needs things around him to work well, to be operating at the highest level, because he's not one of these escape the pocket, make things happen on their own when the play breaks down sort of guys. And that's the downside of drafting a player like Mac Jones. You have to build around them. You have to give him time. You have to, call the right types of plays. You have to have people around him that can make plays. He doesn't have a big arm. You need some yak guys. They don't have any of that. So they really are deficient almost across the board. And then on top of that, you basically take this big pile of tinder and just throw gasoline and matches on it by bringing in just sticks of dynamite, by bringing in Patricia and Judge to coach it. And this was like, I don't know, early in the season and before the end of training camp, it had already kind of slit, moved over into, this definitely seems like a bad idea, to this is possibly the most negligent thing Bill Belichick has ever done with any of his teams ever, is putting these guys in charge of a second-year quarterback. The third year of a rookie quarterback is a really important year. You see a lot of teams pushing their chips all in on those. You see what the Miami Dolphins have done. You see what's happened with Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles and all the talent they've surrounded with. Patriots are at a real crossroads because they don't even know if they can move forward with their quarterback because they absolutely stunted his development for a year. To be able to determine whether he's the guy. These guys, and you look at some of the best analysts out there, guys who really break stuff down, Bedard, Evan Lazar, Taylor Kyles, who does some stuff for us. They point out some really fundamental, like basic things that they're doing wrong. It's not just imagination or scheme. It's literally plays that are doomed to fail before the ball is snapped. The receivers running routes that are too deep for the drop back that Mac is, that Mac has, where it's time for him to throw 1, 2, 3 and out. They haven't even gotten in their roots and turned their heads around. They're running receivers really close to one another. They're not running any play action, even though it's been proven to be effective. There's so many basic things that you would think that they could do, but the longer it goes, the more it's clear, like they don't have any idea what they're doing on the offensive side of the ball. And it's just being allowed. And that's what's crazy here. And to go back to my initial point, what you have now is kind of, it's easy to point fingers here and point fingers here. Yeah, the offensive line is terrible. And yeah, the coaching has been really bad. But Mac's not helping himself out either. Last game, for example, he had time. They actually ran some plays where he could throw the ball a little bit more downfield. He just missed guys all game long, missed really easy throws, didn't make big league throws. I think he was, his numbers, and again, expected yards, expected per play, his completion percentage was the worst of the entire year for what would have been expected. You basically are at a point where you could plug in a replacement level guy instead of Mac and be able to run this offense as well or better. That sucks because that should have been an area that the Pats had locked in and they don't. So now you've got question marks everywhere. Like, what do you do? Go get another quarterback, give Mac another year, spend a ton of money to put a bunch of talent around him and realize we're not going anywhere because this guy's no good. It's a really difficult position to be in.
It really is. And it's unfortunate because, I've definitely seen mixed opinions on Mac. Some of it is, they never really gave Mac a good enough chance to be able to succeed in this system, which I do agree with, because I think, they didn't really build around him and what he can do and his skill set and provide him with the talent that he needs to be able to utilize his strengths as a quarterback.
Right.
But I also at the same time do think that there are aspects of Mac that just are not working. And when they drafted him, obviously I was excited about it because I was like, he's going to be our quarterback. We have to be excited about the situation, like he could be the future. But at the same time, I was a little unsure because I was like, well, I mean, is he going to be the type of quarterback that's going to really be able to play in the Patriot system? And I feel like Belichick is just obviously really stubborn in his ways. And there are certain things I feel like that he just doesn't want to change or won't change. And I think the Patriots as an organization just feel like Mac can adapt to certain situations that he can't adapt to. And I think there should have been more work as soon as they drafted him. If they knew that he was going to be their guy, or they were at least going to try to make him the guy going forward, that they would do more to kind of build a team around his strengths. And I don't think that that's what they did. And I think now we're in the situation where, so what do we do now going into next season? Like, do they still feel like Mac could be the guy? But then in that case, they're taking a big risk because then they could make a bunch of moves that are like, okay, this is what Mac does well, so let's surround him with players that can go well and complement him. And then if that still doesn't work because he's still making the same mistakes and they know he's not the guy, but then they've lost even more time trying to figure that out. On the other token, though, there definitely needs to be a personnel change. I think, obviously Matt Patricia doing the play calling is not working. I even could argue that it might be almost time to move on from Belichick at this point, because we are now at the point, I think, where this team might just need some massive change. And I mean, some people might disagree with that part of it just because of Bill's resume, but honestly, I'm starting to feel like it might be time to move on from that whole generation of Patriots coaching.
Well, so here's the thing. This is the toughest part of the conversation, and this is where I've always thought it was going to go. I've been going back and forth with colleagues and friends just in terms of how I think it ends for Belichick, and I've always thought it ends not with it. Belichick's not getting fired. He's earned way too much credit and respect here. But there's a phrase we like to use on the Garden Report. We called uncomfortable conversations. Sometimes people have to have uncomfortable conversations, and right now, Robert Kraft and Bill Belichick need to have an uncomfortable conversation. And that has to be, from Robert. Bill, I have stayed out of your way. You have done crazy unconventional things and over and over and over again, and it's paid dividends, and you've almost always been proven right. So there's been no reason to question you. And I respect your autonomy and the vision and the program you've created, ... However, things have gone in a direction right now where I think you need some help. Are you willing to accept it? And that help means you have to get out of your comfort zone and bring in some coaches from the outside who aren't people from your system who know you and do exactly what it is you tell them to do. You need to bring in some other voices who can really challenge and question you on personnel. You might need to hand over entirely general manager duties, or bring in somebody who's going to be your co-equal in this matter and really defer to them on matters of the draft and other things like that, and then focus mainly on whatever it is. But you're still the best. You're a freaking genius. I would want no one else in the world to be doing this but you, but we have to get you some help. And then it all comes down to how Bill responds to that. Is he going to share? Is he going to be able to play nice in the sandbox, with other people? I don't know. Robert Kraft made this mistake way back in the day, famously with Bill Parcells, and that's one of the reasons why he's keeping his hands off here. As he's always given Bill carte blanche to do whatever he wants. But the track record is bad, even though, yes, there's some decent players coming here in the draft, but you've still got strange things that only Bill does, the Cole Stranges of the world, drafting guys way off the board, taking 2 tight ends when you needed tight ends that weren't even among the top 6 or 7 tight ends, taking a kicker in round 5 when you needed a kicker who ended up, releasing for a couple of different reasons, but also the fact he couldn't friggin' kick. There's a lot of misses here. There's a lot of high in the draft misses there. There's also having a very small draft board, something that he gets really dinged for. He really only scouts a few players, and he gets recommendations from people whose opinions he trusts, and he only has said it outright. I only want players on my team that I want on my team, guys I can coach, which means he's not embracing the potentially difficult personality or the person that needs grooming or molding. They always have to fit into whatever Belichick thinks. But the bigger issue now is you start to wonder whether Belichick spent his entire life saying, I know what makes winning football, and I know what a good football player is. And both of those things you can call into question recently, both in terms of how the game has changed, whether Bill has changed with it, because he's always been so far ahead of everybody. I think he just got past, and I don't think he fully realized it. And that's what it takes to win in the NFL nowadays. And I honestly think even the drafting of Mac Jones to me signified maybe not fully grasping that a quarterback like Mac Jones doesn't really work anymore. Outside of you have to be Tom Brady or Drew Brees to be that physically limited and still be outstanding. Really, there's no one else. And people will say, well, Joe Burrow is not that. Joe Burrow is an elite athlete. Joe Burrow can escape if he needs to. Joe Burrow has incredible physical tools, even if he doesn't have a big arm. He is a superior athlete. There are not quarterbacks who just go out there and with a kind of a weak sort of arm, just pick you apart with accuracy. Now, if Mac Jones was incredibly accurate, you'd be happy, but he's not right now. So he's not even that. But again, you've created a world in which everything has to be perfect and everybody else is drafting athletes and people with physical tools. And of course, some of those guys fail. I just don't know that a guy like Mac can even succeed. And I think Belichick's read on the game, thinking that he can get away with that at the quarterback position because we'll just do what we did with Brady, is a bit of a misread on what's going on in the trend in the NFL these days. So, I don't know. That's what it comes down to. As you said, whether you move on or not, they need to have that uncomfortable conversation.
Yeah, I mean, you look at people like Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, even that you mentioned before. These younger quarterbacks are able to just do a lot more on the field and they're versatile. Whereas, back in the day when it was, the Drew Breeses and Tom Brady's of the world that were dominating the league, they couldn't do as much, but they didn't really have to. And Mac Jones is not even close to where Patrick Mahomes is at in terms of his ability on the football field and what
I
he
mean,
can
yeah,
do.
exactly.
It's just there's just such a blatant difference between our quarterback and some of these quarterbacks that these other teams have. Like, I mean, Josh Allen's unbelievable. He pretty much does it all, and I feel like more quarterbacks now are starting to be able to do it all. And Mac is obviously talented in some ways, but I don't know that, he would be able to succeed really in other systems either. Because you can argue that, the Patriots, like I said before, I don't think have really done enough to build around his strengths, which I still do believe. But also, you could stick him in Tua's position with.
I don't know what his strengths are, though. That's the thing. But almost beside the point. It just, I think Bill's just grabbing some of the wrong types of guys these days, and
Yeah.
that's the thing. You see it time and again, and I think Max, sadly at this point, Mac looks like another misfire, which is crazy because it's really expensive and it's really hard to get a quarterback. To have a player that some teams might have drafted, I believe the story that San Fran was really torn between Lance and Mac. The idea that someone like Mac Jones might have gone in the top 5 of the draft and you were able to land him at 15 and to miss. I don't know when you get another shot at somebody with that kind of pedigree right now. Most of the top quarterbacks in the league, the majority of them, with the exception of Jalen Hurts right now, are first-round picks, high first-round picks, and oftentimes picks that you trade up for to get. Teams are selling out to get their guy. You don't get one that falls in your lap where they're going to be drafting, which is probably around 18, 19, 20 this year. So that means, what are you going to do? Make a massive trade with 17 picks and try to get one, acquire one that way, throw the bank at Lamar Jackson or someone like that. I mean, obviously very few quarterbacks there. You've put yourself in a real hole here, not really having a succession plan from Brady if Mac isn't the guy.
Yeah, it's definitely a very difficult situation. I think the game has changed a lot over the years, and I think now it would be in the Patriots' best interest to get some, new faces in there that can kind of have a different outside perspective
Blow it up.
on what's going on with the
Blow it up.
Patriots right now. But I don't know that they would be ready for that change and open to that change, which I think is a big part of the problem too.
Yeah, I think fans are ready. I think fans have seen, have looked into the Patriots' future, and it involves a whole ton of mediocrity. I know there were a lot of Mac defenders before the year, and there's quite a few now. I've never been one. I've always thought I thought his ceiling was middle of the pack quarterback. I don't believe that you're winning with the 15th, 16th, 17th best quarterback unless every aspect of your team is dominant. And then, yes, maybe. But again, chances are very small. Just from a fan perspective, we've won a lot of Super Bowl titles here. We've seen quite a bit. I want to see something fun. The thing that bothers me most about the Patriots this year is they're so freaking boring. There's no big plays. There's no splash plays. There's nothing downfield. There's no electric talents. There's nothing. You got one fast guy, Tyquan Thornton, and he's barely seen the field. Like, there is nothing exciting about watching the Patriots. I would flex them. Not only I would flex them out of Sunday night games, I would literally put them like wherever, like, at 3 a.m. if possible. Like, nobody wants to see
not primetime games.
Nobody wants to see the Patriots play. They are so boring. So from a fan perspective, yeah, wins were great. The best thing about the Patriots, they weren't always super exciting with Brady, but the workman-like efficiency, they were like assassins. They would just go to work on you, and it was like ninjas, just bing, bang, boom. It was over. You had no idea. So you could just puff your chest out at the invincibility of it all and how just they were like, I'll throw 15 short passes up and down the field all day long if you give it to me. I do not care, and I will score 7 touchdowns in a row. Try to beat me. Didn't matter. They did it. And so again, so the dominance made it fun. Now you've got neither wins nor style, nothing. There's almost no reason to watch it. So again, shake it up, if only because we're bored out of our freaking minds here.
Yeah, it's so true. No, that's such a good point.
So bored.
I think the change is needed and evident now. It's just a matter of, are they as an organization ready to make those changes? And it's going to be a lot. And I think there's going to be an adjustment period with those changes. But I do think it could be really, really beneficial for the Patriots as a whole, because I think it's just getting to be too much now of trying to maintain what they've been used to doing.
Yeah.
And it's just not working. And I think, Belichick's coaching tree needs to become a little bit more widespread at
just
this point.
To put a bow on it, I before had always thought Belichick's never going to accept outside help or
I still don't think
or
so.
be humbled. I now actually think it's possible. I do think a lot of this is hubris, but I think he sees it. I think he knows he screwed it up. I think he knows the coaches were a bad move. I think he's owning it. I think he's trying very hard to not throw players under the bus, to not throw coaches under the bus, and to try to take it all upon himself, because I think he recognizes that the team's in the position that they're in right now, largely because a lot of the decisions that he's made. And that's the thing, is when you're number one guy, and you run the whole show, you get the credit, you get the blame. I mean, there's a lot of people out there who believe Belichick is the architect more so than Brady for those 20 years. And without him, they would be nowhere. And that's a lot of credit to be given a behind the scenes person, a coach or a general manager type. So right now it's hard to argue that they're not where they are because of a series of decisions that Belichick made, from draft to a brutally busted personnel free agent class with Aguilar, Hunter Henry, who might be the worst starting skill position player in the NFL. Jonnu Smith, who honestly I forget exists for weeks at a time. That offensive line, they've always thought like I can plug anybody in here. And then now you got the quarterback and the coaching situation. These are Belichick decisions, and he's made them. I mean, not having the succession plan from Brady, not retaining Brady. I mean, not retaining the greatest player who's ever played a sport is honestly reason enough to fire most people. Like, there's not a lot of people who could survive that. Like, it's a good idea to trade LeBron. Like most people don't do that. To not just trade him, just to let him go for free wherever. You can't survive that. And Belichick somehow was like, yeah, and then the guy goes and wins a freaking Super Bowl the next year. Most people, their career is over right then and there. So, I mean, he's already, he's used up all of his goodwill just on the Brady decision alone. Now you're 3 years removed from it, and you look farther away from competing than you did when he left, and that's bad.
Yep. And the rest of the division is getting better and more competitive now too, even with the Jets. Look at the season that they're having too. It's just they're in a really competitive division, and the Patriots just don't really look like they're even close to where they're not even close to where the Dolphins and Bills are at right now.
Nope.
And it's I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done. I really am having a hard time seeing Bill actually actively welcome change.
Yeah, I know. We'll see what happens. Yeah, Jets have a much more talented roster top to bottom too. Zach might be worse than Mac right now, but yeah.
No, that's another topic for another day.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, definitely some frustrating times there, but a team that actually has been having a very, very good start to their season is our Celtics. Obviously beginning of the season has been great, putting up really, really good offensive numbers. Obviously the coaching situation to start the season was a question mark. Everything that went down there in the off season and then going into the season with Missoula, people were unsure how that was going to go. They seem to be picking up right where they left off to start the season from the finals last year. Now they have Rob Williams back, but they're starting to struggle, the last few games offensively. have not really been what they were before. So I really just kind of want to start with, because obviously I want to break all that down too, but I
Sure.
want to kind of start with your thoughts generally on how the season started. Them coming into the season basically unstoppable and looking like a team that really pretty much was impossible to beat at the beginning.
Yeah. So, you just I think it's fair to label me, generally speaking, when it comes to sports, as a skeptic. I got to see it before I buy in fully, even though I will get excited about certain things. But like, you know, I I was a little concerned just the way they left the season with how bad the offense looked. I think that was the greatest concern during the course of the regular season, which made it really difficult for me last year to fully buy into a team that had been so dominant defensively, but could look so bad offensively. And so you watch that offense totally shut down. In the finals, you watch Jason Tatum totally be neutralized. You started to ask some questions like, is there enough personnel wise there? And is Tatum that dude? And then they go out and they have that awesome offseason and they sign everything. And then literally, I've never seen a team win an offseason and lose an offseason like weeks apart. You get the Gallinari injury. Obviously you trade for Brogdon, you sign Gallinari, great. Gallinari blows his ACL, and granted, he was just a depth piece, but I think they could have used him. Then you have Rob Williams, bad news with him getting shelved, and then the surgery, and then how long he's going to be out. Then the Ime stuff. And I thought, we'd spent an entire year basically saying, a couple of years saying, Brad's not the guy for this team. And it turned out he wasn't. He actually self-reported that. I'm not the guy for this team, and he knew it. And they brought in Ime, and, I was one of those people that wanted them to be coached harder because I think they needed that direction. And it didn't take at the beginning of the year. And then it did. And you hear all of these stories, how Ime would walk into locker rooms and tell them flat out, you guys are playing like assholes. So and that would turn them around. I thought that was important. I thought they really needed his direction. And so I was really skeptical about the Missoula thing. And I thought this was going to be a problem. And I thought without Rob, and with the coaching, whatever, it was going to be ugly. And then they absolutely changed everybody's hearts and minds with how they were playing, especially offensively. And I wouldn't say tricked me, but I was all in, because I think defense is a choice in the sense that I know this team can play defensively anytime they want to turn it up. They can. It's an 82 game season. I think sometimes you're going to see teams kind of take some nights or some plays off coast from time to time. So some of the defensive lapses early in the season didn't bother me, because the offense, they had a totally new identity. It wasn't just the shots were going down, but the way they were moving without the ball, setting screens for one another, trusting each other, and just the way that they were playing was so just intoxicating. It was so fun to watch. And so I really bought into that offensive identity being the new identity of the team. But we missed some warning signs. They were shooting a ridiculously high percentage. For a while, you had Derek White shooting 47%, Grant Williams nearly 50%, Hauser 46, 47%. Marcus Smart for the whole month of November, after a bad start in October, was shooting 40-something% from three. All of these numbers were way over career averages. And what we've seen in December is they crashed. But now it's a question of, did they just regress to the mean with the shooting that, yeah, you knew those guys would eventually level out. And in order to level out when you're that hot, you got to cool down. It just happens so fast, so abruptly, all at the same time. It leaves me wondering whether it's more of a result of them abandoning the things that were working for them earlier in the year, allowing those kind of 2021 sort of things kind of to seep back in, which is missing shots, allowing that to affect your defense, your body language, getting back, not executing on both ends as a result. And you've seen quite a bit of that. And certainly there's some players more affected than others, but it's they've been infected by it again. And since we've seen it before, it scares the crap out of me. Do I think that this is the new version of the Celtics and we should get used to this, or should we get used to inconsistency? Not yet. But when you see them fall into these really bad habits, as they have recently on the offensive end, a lot of early in the shot clock threes, even when they're not going down, not working, looking for a better shot, no paint touches whatsoever, not moving without the ball, a bunch of guys just standing around. I hate that. So you want to see them not just fix it one game. You want to see them have a stretch of games where they go back to it. Even if the shots aren't falling at a ridiculous clip, you got to see the style of basketball go back to what it was early to start to feel a little bit better about this kind of recent stretch here. And I really do think that the Golden State Warriors, they tried to make not a big deal about it. I think they put that back in their brain a little bit. It sounds cliche. Oh, it's still in their head. That stuff matters. Like, losses don't always go away. This idea of flushing the loss, I think that doesn't actually exist. Like, it's there always. You learn from it. You don't, but it doesn't leave your memory. Like, you take a beating, you're going to remember that. And they remember it. And they remember how bad it felt to feel that way with a title on the line, and then to feel it all over again. And then they've just gone out and they've played some really bad basketball since then.
Yeah, I mean, losing 2 games at home to the Magic, who had won 1 game on the road going into that 2-game set, that's not a team that you look at and expect to lose like that to 2 games in a row. And to me, I'm looking at it and it's like, yeah, I mean, obviously they weren't going to maintain what they were doing offensively for the entirety of the season, every single game, because that's just impossible to do. And you knew not everybody was going to be shooting like that all season. But I definitely thought that it was going to be a little bit more of a gradual drop off, that maybe we would start to see, okay, maybe people like Hauser start to cool down sooner. And then you have other guys who are starting to kind of fall back into a more quote unquote normal level of, their shooting percentages. But it almost was like something changed in their heads, like it just all of a sudden. And now everybody as a whole is just doing the same things at the same time. And it's really, really strange because I don't know what's really would have changed it at that specific point. And I wanted to feel like it was because they were getting fatigued from that West Coast trip towards the end.
That's real. That stuff's real.
That it was like, yeah, they had a long road trip. They were playing late games. They had, the time difference and going to play all these teams on the West Coast. Like, that stuff does make a difference. So, I was saying, hopefully when they come back home, this will kind of fix itself. It didn't really fix itself in those games against Orlando. I don't know if the fact that they have this 2-day break before they play again tomorrow is a bad thing or a good thing for them. It's really, really hard to know what they're going to look like when they do play tomorrow. But I think, it's a little bit concerning that it seems to be happening to everybody all at once. And especially with how well they were shooting the ball from 3 to what they're doing now, where they're basically abysmal from 3 and they can't get anything to fall really from behind the arc. And it's just really frustrating to try to understand
why
this is happening to everybody right now.
It's basic. It's basic, but it's not always easy to fix. It is, their success was very much dependent on attacking and then passing, and they stopped. They became passive and they just started shooting. And that's what's happened before. The difference between the problem is, after the games, they're saying things that I don't love hearing, like they were good looks. They're not good looks. They're not in the same way that they were created before. It was attacking and moving the ball very quickly around. They were passing up good shots to get great shots. That's how they were going in. They were attacking, they were sucking in the D, and they were giving it out again. Or sometimes they would score from, or they would get points from other places too. Not only were they hitting a ton of threes, they would get easy buckets by attacking. They're no longer attacking. They're not passing, and they're not moving the same way. They have to get back to it. And again, almost at every point last year when the offense stagnated, it was the same issue. And that's the problem. And this is the kind of curse of players like Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. They're so individually offensively gifted that they are among, the few players in the NBA where you give them the ball. This is the hardest thing to do in basketball. Give me the ball, get out of my way, and I'm going to score. Okay, that's hard. It's the number one skill. It's the toughest skill. It's the one you prize and value the most because very few people can do it. But sometimes you kind of get stuck in that where you just start doing it too much, and then you're not involving other people, and that becomes what your offense is about. And the other people are standing around and they're not as active. And then when it is their time, they're not really ready for it, or they're not in the flow of things. It's always bugged me with these guys in the past. Pass the ball. you'll get it back again. But sometimes there's that vibe that if I give it up, I'm not going to shoot this possession. So it's over for me. So again, we saw it working where Tatum would give it, move, run around a screen, relocate, get it in a better position where he could attack. What happens is when those guys have it and hold it, the defenses really lock in on them. They see what's coming. They know what's coming. Turnovers are up. Many of those turnovers are dribble into traffic and into difficult, sticky situations, into traps, into defenses that are waiting for you. So they had they had defenses on their heels by through their incredible ball movement, and they just stopped doing it. So they just have to get back to it. It's easy it's easy to see when you watch it, but they're just not doing it. And this is kind of where Joe comes in, and this is a big thing in our post-game show chats on the Garden Report. As last game, half the chat was it's Joe. If Missoula is going to be credited for, giving them some liberty and some freedom to be able to play the way they were playing at the beginning of the season, which I think he deserves some credit. Yeah. Now I don't like this. Let him play through it. Let him figure it out and this and that. That's kind of your job. That's what you get paid to do. Like, that's what you're supposed to do. The no calling timeouts thing, that's your job. You're supposed to call timeouts. Settle them. You're that guy. They're playing. They're already doing the hard stuff. The hard stuff is playing. Your job is to put them in the best position to succeed. So I don't know. Maybe these life lessons and these lumps they're taking and learning now will help them down the road. But I also think it doesn't matter how many years you've been in the league. You want direction, you want control, you want order. You want to know that somebody's out there looking out for you guys, because when things start spiraling out of control or things aren't going well, you start looking at each other and start thinking like, well, I'm doing my part and you're not doing your part. And you don't want that to kind of seep in, because everything was going so great. They were playing so well. It was such a great team brand of basketball, and the vibes were so good with the team that, like, you just want to get it back. So just get it back, just work towards getting it back. You got to you got to flush these bad habits and kind of get back to what you were doing.
Yeah, at least obviously, it's better that this is happening now rather than down the stretch. During,
totally. Yeah, you take lumps during the year. It's not, this isn't this isn't terminal, but it's ugly right now. It's really ugly.
Yeah, because the brand of basketball they were playing earlier on in the season was really fun to watch. Everybody was getting involved. They were, their pace of play was a lot better too.
Yeah.
And that's something that's been talked about a lot lately too, how just the pace at which they move the ball now is down compared to what they were doing before. So it was a lot harder before for defenses to really figure out what they were doing or figure out where the ball even was. Now it's more like, oh, maybe I should just take this shot right now and hope it goes in. And not really thinking as much about what they're doing, or on offense, just not really getting everybody involved as much. And it's tough to see that, because we know that this isn't their basketball. They're just almost forgetting how to play Celtics basketball. And I mean, even just rushing shots sometimes, like even this past game against Orlando, when they had, there were like 5 seconds left on the clock, they could have taken a much better shot than Grant took when he just tossed it up right when the ball was inbounded, because he felt like he had to take that shot. They had a couple seconds in there where they could have, found a better shot to take for that three and been set up better to take that shot. And I feel like there's certain situations like that where they just are in situations where they're just throwing up a shot and hoping that it goes in. It's just not working.
It's fewer the numbers. If you dig really deep, you're going to see fewer catch and shoot threes, more pull up threes. That's not the type of basketball that you want to play. You really want to kind of work it and get those shots through passing and through attacking. And again, it's just what they're what they're not doing lately.
Yeah, they're just
they're just shooting more. Yep.
Exactly. Yeah, but I mean, obviously, we know how talented they are and what they can do. I do think they'll turn it around. I think, this is a slump. Obviously, there was visible frustration during that Warriors game. We saw it on their faces towards the end of the game. We saw it in, some people's actions too. Grant Williams. But there was visible frustration there for good reason, because I think they understand that there are certain things that are just not going right for them right now, but it's just a matter of let's address the situation now so that they can fix it.
It's scary to see them repeat fatal mistakes because they can creep back in. Where I kind of bought it was I bought in both the fact that the brand of basketball was allowing them to play in a way that was better and more suited to the skill set of the players on the team. I think adding Malcolm Brogdon, I think helped a lot, certainly with that bench unit. I think they found some rotations. I think when you see those habits creep back in, there's legitimate questions about who they are. Are they the team that beat the crap out of everybody, or are they this really flawed team that at any point in time can play this style of basketball and lose to anybody? And nobody was thinking that before. It was finals or bust. And now it's like, yikes. And so that's the thing, is like, because you've seen it before, it's impossible to unsee it. And there's going to be questions with this team. Even if they rip off 10, 15 straight, I know there'll be a huge portion of Celtics fans will be like, see, it was no big deal. It's there, though. And that's fine. I get it. That's how some people consume it. They want to feel better about it. They want everyone to shut up who has critical things to say. They don't want to hear it. They think it's just noise or people hating on them. Again, we all kind of want the same thing, and that's to see the Celtics play well and do well. But I can't unsee that stuff. And I know when I know that it's there, it's always going to make me nervous with this team, that it can arise at any time. And certainly you don't want it to arise at the most inopportune time, because that's the kind of stuff that can tank an entire season.
Yeah, it's so true. It's definitely so true that this is just something we are familiar with and have seen before, and knowing that at any time they could become that team again. Because imagine if they became this team in the playoffs.
Yes.
It's just really scary. It just seems like it's almost two completely opposite personalities of the team. And that's just really, really scary to think about.
That's what freaks me out. I'm a little worried right now. I'm not, I haven't changed my opinion. I still think this team's ceiling, it always comes down to ceiling for me. I think this team's ceiling is NBA champion. There's no question about it. And I think this team's best beats almost everybody else's best. That's the best thing to have in your back pocket as a Celtics fan, it by far. Knowing that it actually doesn't matter what you do. If I do my thing, we're good. That's the best. You want to be that team. But, because it's the worst thing is, well, if, like I'd rather be the unless, like if we do all of this stuff and they don't have that and they don't have that, maybe we've got a shot. They're not that team. They're the team that knows it. They show up any night, play their best brand of basketball, both ends of the floor. They're better. They're better than you. That's a great place to be. So again, that's where people should take their solace, knowing that the ceiling is extremely high for this team. They just got to figure it out again, because this stuff has been, ugly right now.
Yep. Yeah, it has. And obviously, they've been doing a lot of this without Rob Williams. He just returned. He's on limited minutes right now, obviously. But it's nice to definitely see him back out there getting some action and getting involved. Again, those Rob blocks are still beautiful to see. Just Rob doing Rob things. But in terms of he's now back into the fold. They were playing really, really good basketball without him there. Do you think that is now going to make another difference when it comes to moving forward this rest of the season?
I think they're going to have, look, anyone who remotely knows me knows what a Rob Williams fan I am. He's like my son, like I'm like, I get so excited and giddy and proud almost. Like I love Rob. I love Rob, and I always have, and I love what he can do, and I still have visions of what he can become, which I think is just, people use the term like unicorn and this and that. I just think he can do some things that most humans can't do. And you really can't. I mean, you just don't see people do the types of things that he can do. He is such an interesting and fun and exciting player. But the thing that bums me out about Rob is that, well, one, the integration is going to take a little bit of time. They were playing one way, and one thing Rob Williams doesn't do at all is shoot or help you with spacing. So now you've got another kind of lump out there that's not going to help that. So you almost have to lean back in to the minutes that he's there on to a different style of playing. The problem is they don't do that when he's out there. They keep playing the way they're playing, and they almost play 4-on-5 offensively. And that's not good. This has been a problem throughout Rob's career.
Yep.
With these players. Okay. It's actually, they have to recognize he's in the game and get him touches, because and get him paint touches because he's a very good passer on the interior. They have to bring him high and give him the ball high on a pick and run sets off of him because he's a really outstanding with the ball in his hands, finding backdoor cutters and this and that. He's got tremendous vision, but they don't incorporate him much at all. And you've got to be looking for those lobs all day long when he's out there instead of, I'm just going to shoot a bunch of threes. And then Rob Williams is literally superfluous on offense. It's useless. So that's a growing pain that they have to get because they've been playing a certain way, but they've always had these issues with Rob. They don't really know what to do with him. What I lament with Rob and his offseason surgery isn't only the thing that the worry that he's going to keep getting hurt and how long is his career going to last. And I'm always worried he's going to go up, come down, start to limp again, and here we go again. That's always going to be there with him because of the track record. But what bums me out is he's yet to have a real full offseason where he can go and develop in a way where he's actually going to come back with more skills and able to do more things, some semblance of a post game, the ability to hit, 10 and 12 foot jumpers, a little bit of ball handling. I think he could take guys off the dribble. He's so athletic. He's just not comfortable enough to do that because he just hasn't had time to develop it because he spent almost every offseason like getting his health right. He has yet to have a physical transformation. I think he should be in much better shape than he's in right now. And he's not because he keeps playing catch up. Right now, he's in horrible basketball shape. He's got to drop a few pounds. He's incredibly winded. So we keep missing windows of opportunity to get Rob to that next level because he's been hurt and it's been tough to get him up to speed there. As far as how it goes, it's a positive. Once they figure it out, if he stays healthy, he changes a lot for what they can do. People forget, not only was he leading candidate for defensive player of the year before getting hurt last year, their offense when he was on the court was incredible because they were, they were doing a lot of good things out there. So you want to see him get back to it if they can. But right now it's still a work in progress and it'll be a little while, but I'm supremely patient with Rob. The best thing about him is physically, he looks good. Physically, he looks springy. Yeah. He's tired, a couple trips down. He's definitely winded, but he looks springy. He looks agile. It's just his instincts are off right now and his conditioning is off a little bit. So he's kind of just, little spazzy out there and definitely does not have enough wind to really last more than 3 or 4 minutes at a time.
Yeah, which makes sense why they're only giving him, those 4 to 5 minute windows at a time when he is on the court. So that's tough for everybody else because obviously they're in a different mindset during the rest of the game in terms of how they're going to play basketball and how they're going to approach the offense. And then he comes on and it's like they almost have to flip a switch to do something different if they want to get him involved. And that's tough to do midway through the game when he's kind of coming in and you've already, been doing things differently. So obviously I'm excited about him being back. I think once he gets fully back up to speed, he is a difference maker for this team. I think if you think about what they were doing without him, they can do even more with him, obviously, but it's just a matter of once he's fully back in shape to be able to do those things, I do think that they can be, a lot more competitive. But like you said, I think Missoula and the other guys on the team need to figure out how are we going to play basketball when he's on the court versus when he's not, because it is going to be completely different. And I think the way that they move the ball and the way that they approach taking shots is going to be a lot different.
Yeah, he's a ceiling raiser, no doubt about it. It'll take time.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely been an exciting season so far for them overall. I think, hopefully they'll get over this hump sooner rather than later. We would hope. I trust that they will, but it's definitely a little bit of a frustration right now. But I really appreciate you hopping on the show with me to discuss all of this.
I love it. Actually, it was fun. We haven't had a garden report since the last game. So there's a lot to discuss there, and I haven't gotten a chance to talk Pats. So it was nice to let a lot of that out. It's interesting. There's a lot
there, obviously.
No, there's a lot going on. It's been building right now. I think a lot of people feel it. So a ton going on. And we didn't even hit on 2 of the other teams in town. There's a ton going on with them as well. So good time to be a Boston sports fan. I think your podcast, you're never going to be short on material and the interesting things to talk about.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It's definitely I could talk about Boston sports all day, every day and not
Yep.
really run out of things to talk about.
Yeah.
So
It's the best thing to do.
definitely appreciate you sharing that passion and hopping on here with me. And
Yeah.
as always, everyone, I appreciate you tuning into the show. Hope you all have a fantastic holiday, safe and healthy holiday with your families. And I will talk to you all next time. Thanks,
Yes.
everybody.